um, get through chapter um, 9, I think, is where we had left off. We'd about finished chapter 8, and we were going to get into chapter 9. And maybe if we get some luck on time, we'll get through chapter 12. What was your name again, sir? I'm sorry. Yeah. Isaac had a question here before class about the public debt project, and so I figured that was a good idea for us to go ahead and talk about that a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up that document from Canvas, and I'll just go ahead and open it here so we get a full screen of it. So deadline is what, November 22nd? What's that? Is that next week? Okay, so let's start by changing that. It doesn't have to be due the 22nd. When do we come back from Thanksgiving? The 29th, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that to the 29th. Maybe you've already done some work on that. That's fine. If you're ready to turn it in the 22nd, that's fine. Let's just say the 29th, just to sort of keep you focused in on it over the holiday. Okay, so that when you get a little extra time when some of your classes aren't convening, we won't get a Thanksgiving holiday per se, and that we won't miss a class date here, which is actually a good thing. But let's make it the 29th, and I'll extend it even to the last day class. If you want to turn it on finals day, that's fine. But don't wait till the finals week to start on this thing. Okay. What is the public debt comprised of? I'm going to suggest that you go to the website of the Bureau of Fiscal Services. Okay. The Bureau of the Fiscal Services is the entity that is responsible for handling the public debt, Bureau of Fiscal Services, and you'll be able to find some things there. You can also look at GAO's audit report on the Bureau of Fiscal Services. I think that report also has some information about the structure of the debt, the composition of the debt. It's basically Treasury bills, notes, and bonds. Most of it is short-term debt, okay, but you can get that as well. How much is the public debt? You'll be able to get that from the Bureau of Fiscal Services. It's probably about $17 trillion. All of these things you can find. How does the federal government incur debt? I think this G. Peterson Foundation will give you some information. What is the interest on the debt? You should be able to get that from the audit report. How much does federal budget how much of the federal budget is used to pay interest on the debt? You can Google that. There are various websites that talk about where the federal budget money goes, where it comes from, the sources of taxes, etc. And you'll be able to look at that. The amount that is auctioned each year, you'll probably see that in the audit report. Who buys the public debt? Good luck finding an authoritative source on that. The federal government probably does a terrible job of determining who finds its debt. So maybe the finding there for you is how poor that is. The history of the public debt, I think I talked about in one of our first classes, but let's go ahead and review that. Okay, and so when you take a look, good morning. When you take a look at who the entities have been, or not the entities, but the presidents who they've been when as we've incurred debt over the years. If you want to start with Reagan, okay, Reagan, it was probably under $1 trillion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. When Bush the father got out, okay, So I'll call them Bush 1. It was about 3.5 trillion. Okay, when Clinton, I guess it's the only Clinton. I had put Clinton 2 at the time because I wasn't sure if we were going to have another. I put Clinton question mark. So when Clinton got out, it was at about 5 trillion. When Bush 2, the son, got out, it was about 10 trillion. And as Obama is leaving office, it'll be about 17 trillion, 18 trillion, maybe 19. Okay, so they've all taken their shot at adding amounts to the public debt. Okay, over the years, you look now, and President-elect Trump is talking about things like, investing in infrastructure while cutting taxes, while maintaining social programs like Social Security. And most people are saying, well, if he does that, it's going to be 40 trillion by the time he gets out, if he's going to continue to spend, money and cut taxes, etc. So, did you forget to bring a piece of paper today? And so as you sit here and you go through all of these different scenarios, you can see that they've all taken their chance to different historical perspective. They've all taken time at adding on their debt. What is the debt ceiling? I think if you Google that, you'll see what's happening with the debt ceiling. There's probably some discussion on that. What are balanced budget amendments? You can Google that. And what are ways to reduce the debt? You can come up and you can sort of play jazz with that. In terms of, what you think, how ways to increase taxes, decrease spending, whatever. And you'll probably see some ideas here on this Peterson, G. Peterson. They've got quite a bit about it there. Okay. So as I said, let's go ahead and change the due date on that to the 29th after Thanksgiving when we reconvene. If you want to hold off on this until, the last day of class, you want to turn it on the final day, I'll still accept it up until the day of the final. Okay? Don't email it. Plan to email it to me after the final is over with. And then in terms of format for this, you can answer these things in paragraph form. You can answer them in bullet form. Put the question and then put some bullets underneath that you think address the various issues. That's fine too. It doesn't have to be like a full-blown essay or anything like that. I just want to see that you spent some time trying to figure out some of these things. Okay? Questions? Yes, sir? Does it have to relate to what? Chapter 210? I don't think I don't know. Is there something in this in chapter 10? Chapter 10 of the book you're talking about? I don't think I think chapter 10 is, I forget what chapter 10 is, business plans or something, isn't it? This is the public debt. Okay, I don't think there's anything in the book that addresses this in any kind of detail. Okay. Question? Okay. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I just posted it up, and I apologize for the somewhat short notice. If you're going to be on campus here today, this afternoon, there's an event where they're going to be talking about transfer opportunities at the different schools, which I guess I was hallucinating when I thought I posted it up here. So I will have to do that, but let me get the flyer out anyway, and then I'll post it up here after class. But okay, today here on campus, we're going to have this event right here, which is this career in business event, 3:30 to 5:30, building 7. What, that way, I guess? 7107 is the room. And it's going to be talking about transferring to the state colleges, to the UCs, the process for that. You'll hear some people talk about, different experiences, successful Ohlone alumni, etc. Okay, and maybe the most important part, refreshments will be served, right? Okay, and that goes from 3:30 to 5:30, and I'm going to give 10 bonus points if you go to this thing. Okay, so something you may want to think about. I'll give you 10 bonus points, and I'll have to put that announcement back up. I could have sworn I put the announcement up, but I don't see it now. Oh, it's in the announcement section. Hello. I'm looking at modules, right? And it's in the announcement section. So let me find that there, so just so you can see the announcement. Say again? Yeah, when I announced it. So it's right here. This is where I should have gone. Okay. And that's that same flyer I'm not going to open, but I will give 10 bonus points, okay, if you want to make it. And I apologize for not giving you sooner notice, but if you do go, I'll be there, so I'll see you, so don't try to say, oh, yeah, I was there. And if you can't get there right at 3:30, and you get there a little later, that's okay. Don't get there at 5:28, okay, because the thing ends at 5:30, so. Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. Any questions on any of that? Okay, good. So let's go ahead then and let's start to talk about Chapter 9, Human Resources Management. We're obviously going to get into this chapter today. We should be able to wrap it up. We're not doing Chapter 10 and 11 here on Business Plan. However, if you do have questions, things you want to talk to me about that chapter, you are more than welcome to take a look at that material, reach out with any questions, or if you're going to do the business plan and you need some help with that, my advice is first look at that chapter, and then if you have questions, help, guidance that you need, feel free to reach out. So after Chapter 9, we'll go to Chapter 12. With any luck, we'll get into that today. If not, we'll start to jump on that next time. Okay? Any questions? Sound like a plan? Okay, good. Let's go ahead then and let's talk about human resources management. Okay, human resources management is all about what? Starting with the planning for the needs of the organization. For example, if we are going to try to get into a new line of business that involves some sort of technological advancements, some sort of technological expertise, then we're going to have to obviously start to plan early to bring in individuals with that particular type of expertise. We, of course, will need to recruit and hire those individuals, and then, we will need to train and motivate. We will need to evaluate. We will need to consider how to compensate, and then if necessary, ending that relationship and repositioning folks. When we talk about compensating, etc., probably another word that should be here, in my opinion, is retaining, right? If you get talent and you go through all that trouble to get talent, you might want to think about, hey, how can we hold on to them? Obviously, compensation is a key hygiene factor. Remember, we talked about hygiene factors last time, but there are also some of those intrinsic things that we'd want to consider as well as part of our retaining process. Okay? So when we think about our staffing, we need to think about our workforce profile, age, okay, education, training, experiences. When we say age, I think looking at the realistic demographic of our staff in terms of, are we having an aging workforce? I think I've mentioned in here a couple of times that I saw a statistic that said something like only 30% of the people working for the federal government are under the age of 30 or something ridiculous like that, which to me means that if you look at the federal government, they have an issue of having newer educated individuals coming into the organization, so maybe there's some some amount of stagnation going on there within the ideas, et cetera, in the workforce. And then I saw another statistic that said something like some over 50% of the federal workforce is over age 50. Okay, and so what that tells you is that the federal workforce is aging and going to need to the federal government's going to have to start looking at ways of attracting new talented individuals to come in and update the knowledge base of the employees. Okay, obviously we need to be looking at the demand for our product in terms of how we're bringing in employees. Again, technological changes. To the extent that we can use temporary workers to help bridge the gap. Again, retirement factors, as I mentioned, I think that's a big one in the federal government now. All of those things need to be considered, right, as we're going to be addressing our workforce needs. Okay. Okay, good. It's a little bit of a hard to see slide. Let's see if we can make this a little bigger on the screen. Well, that's not going to help us at all. Seems like I should be able to stretch this a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at how a company might look at its needs. Okay, marketing manager, giving the job description, job specifications. Very specific what we're looking for, 3 or more years of experience in this example, excellent communication skills, demonstrated experience in event execution, etc. Okay, these are the nature of things that you should see in a good job description, specifications. If there's anything unique about the position, this is a good thing to put in there. I was dealing with one of the state universities. They were having trouble attracting individuals for tenure track for professors and whatnot. And one of the things that they suggested to put in there is the opportunity to work in the Bay Area. Okay, and so if there's something like that you think makes your particular job more attractive, etc., you're going to want to put that in your job description, job specifications. Okay, internal recruiting is an option, okay, and there's some advantages to that. Morale booster, okay, faster, less costly, less risk, okay, you're dealing with known quantities in many cases there, okay. Some of the disadvantages: limited pool of candidates, creates escalating internal vacancies. If I promote Bob to Mary's position, now I'm going to have to find somebody for Bob's position. I promote Susan to Bob's position, now I got to fill Susan's position, whatever, right? And then they talk about may increase resistance to change. I guess maybe that group thinking that we were talking about last time, that maybe we're not bringing in any new thoughts on how the company should function if we're always hiring from inside. So I think where you can do internal recruiting, that's good. I think that when you do recruit from the outside, that can have a real impact on morale. When I worked for the federal government, we had an opportunity. I thought I had an opportunity that I was going to be promoted to a assistant director position. And, I was all hopped up. I'm thinking, hey, I'm sort of right there. It's going to be a good opportunity, etc. And they immediately announced that they weren't going to hire anybody from the inside, that they were going to try to attract somebody from public accounting. So that was a real morale killer for me, because I'm like, so you're telling me, and they gave me my 10-year award. And I told them when they gave it to me that why didn't they just put on there that I should have worked in public accounting 10 years ago. That's what I told them they should put on it, which is probably a wrong thing for me to say. But I'm just sharing with you the experience that when people think, oh, okay, yeah, always promote outside and get new blood. But when it's happening to you, it can be a real stinger sometimes. And so I wouldn't underestimate the potential for downward impact on morale from recruiting outside. Okay. External recruiting, okay? Different ways that you can do this. Newspapers, whatever. I'm thinking these days it's all about the job websites. I mean, nowadays you can Google on anything. Indeed.com is one that I've seen used quite a bit. There's even one for recruiting for educational purposes. It's called highereducation.com or something, where they list all the different teaching positions at colleges, that sort of thing. What is it? Monsters.com, right? Monster.com. There's all kinds of ways. And this is becoming more and more the way that a lot of people use. Headhunters. What's a headhunter? You guys dealt with headhunters at all, or heard of headhunters? Headhunters are basically these recruiting firms that the companies will go to and say, we're looking for somebody with this much experience, etc. And they just outsource the recruiting to the headhunters. And then the headhunters do is they gather resumes, that sort of thing, and then they go and they find and they produce candidates to the employer, etc. The only problem with headhunters from the standpoint of the person who's being recruited, you need to be careful. A headhunter would sell their mother to the highest paying bidder, okay? They don't care necessarily how well they're lining you up with the company. They just want the company to like you and to hire you, and even though it may be a terrible mistake for you to accept that job, the headhunter will hypnotize you into thinking that it's the best position, that God created this position for you. So you got to be a little bit careful when you're the hunted with these headhunters. A lot of my students who pass the CPA exam and work for a CPA firm, after 1 year at a CPA firm, they are heavily recruited from these headhunters, and they tell me, John, I don't even know how this headhunter got my information, but they won't stop. They won't leave me alone. So they're pretty aggressive. By the same token, I know some people who have gotten some really nice positions by working through a headhunter, but you got to be careful.
So, will there be headhunters like in those college fairs, like in those groups, or is that something completely different?
That's more like the college career fairs, etc. That's generally not headhunters. That's usually people from the firm, and usually they'll put somebody that's an alumni to the school. I used to do those quite a bit with the GAO. I would go back to Cal State East Bay and stand behind the booth and hand out information about the agency and that kind of stuff. So that's typically the case in those job booths. That's a pretty good source because there's usually a recruiter there as well. So if you go to those, bring your resume, dress somewhat. If you're at an outdoor job fair, you don't want to be walking around in a suit and tie. But by the same token, don't be wearing the kind of thing I'm wearing today. You probably want to, wear something somewhat professional. And a lot of times, you can make an impression right there at one of those career fairs. What they have for accounting firms is they call it the Meet the Firms is what they call these, and it's all accounting firms. And what I do when I go to those at the universities, I tell my students to go talk to recruiters that I know. I'll say, hey, go talk to that guy over there and tell him that you're taking my class and stuff. So it's a good networking thing, but that's typically not headhunters. Headhunters are usually they're more recruiting of experienced staff. So after you've gone through and you've had a couple of years and you've got some experience, and then the job description says 3 years experience, that's the type of thing where often they will use a headhunter to help with that. Increasingly, what do they call that thing? LinkedIn is a good way to not only recruit for jobs, but also to be recruited. And not that we're talking about this, I don't want to turn this into a recruiting, how to find a job discussion, although why not? Maybe if we got time, we can do that. But I had somebody reach out to me in LinkedIn now where they look at your profile and stuff, and then they say, you look like you might be a good fit for what I'm looking for, and they'll actually reach out to you on LinkedIn as well. So all of these are different ways of finding individuals, and of course being found. If you're the person looking for the job as well, you might want to leverage off some of these. Okay? Okay. Um, so what happens? We identify the candidate, then we do the interview with that candidate. Typically, these days, companies are very careful with these interviews. They're usually structured. They're going to ask everybody the same question at about the same pace, set up the same amount of time for the interview, etc. Because they don't want somebody saying, well, they didn't show any interest in me because I'm a certain group of individuals that they don't want to hire or something. So they're very careful about how they do this. There could be a testing that gets done. They'll check references. Usually checking of references is something that you do after you've identified the candidate, okay? Because it's a little bit, if you think about it, I don't want to say unethical. What's the word when something lacks class? It's a little, well, what's the word? Not ethics, but when they tell you which fork, it's bad etiquette is the word I'm looking for. Etiquette, and when I'm talking about using the right fork, for when you eat dinner and stuff, etiquette training. It's bad etiquette, okay, to go and start asking of the person's references, because what happens? Those references now may be business associates of that individual, etc., and you go and you ask the references, and then the references know that that person was considered for the job, and then they don't hire the person. To me, that's a little bit bad etiquette, because now all that person's references know that they put in for the job. They said good things. They call you up and say, hey, John, how did it turn out? Oh, I didn't get the job. Oh, okay. Hey, John didn't get the job, right? And so probably if you're checking references, you are looking for you've identified the candidate that you want, and you're just checking to make sure that at least the references respond to you. You rarely do references going to say a lot of anything bad about the candidate, etc. Okay, and then you go ahead and you make that final selection, and then you bring the onboarding process as you hire the individual, etc. So pretty involved process. Usually for most companies, the real kind of scary part is in here, okay? Because after you've really identified the individual you want, that individual could be in demand by several recruiters, etc. And sometimes this part takes a little bit of time, and you could lose a candidate that you're very interested in during that time frame. So the more streamlined you can get this, the better. Okay. Okay. Good. Taking a look at laws, okay, employment opportunity laws, equal opportunity laws. Obviously you don't want to have any discrimination in your hiring practices. Now we consider Americans with Disabilities Act, so we have to make reasonable accommodation for individuals that may have a disability that requires that. Age discrimination. You can't sit there and say, well, geez, we don't want to hire anyone over 40 for this position or something like that. Those individuals are protected under the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. So all of these different things. Okay, good. So let's take a look at a couple multiple choice questions, practice exam questions, quiz questions, whatever you want to call these. Gabriella is in charge of hiring new employees for her company. She decides she needs to assess the future demand for employees through forecasting and sets out to learn more about it. Which of the following statements about forecasting does Gabriella discover is false, and what? We don't consider the anti-discrimination policies as part of our forecasting. Forecasting is what? What are our needs? What are our time frames for our needs? What are our future needs, etc.? And then, that gets into that. Maintaining, living within the responsibilities on an employer under the anti-discrimination policies has nothing to do with the forecasting. Okay. Number 5, Elizabeth saw a posting for a new job on her company's intranet, right? We're all familiar with an intranet inside of a company cannot be accessed by the public. Typically, what happens with an intranet is when the employee basically boots up their browser, the home page will typically be the intranet of the company, which can only be accessed internally, right? That's an intranet. And often, if it's a closed job posting, meaning that it's only for internal employees, that's where we will click on job opportunities on the intranet. And so she finds about this, that was an example of what? Internal recruiting. Okay, so you get these individuals on board. Now you're going to have to train them. Okay. One of the things that a lot of candidates ask when they're getting ready to go into a job is what is the training, especially for a newer individual. What a lot of the CPA firms do these days is they'll send you to boot camp. Okay, they'll say, okay, well, when we bring you in, we're going to send you to our trainings headquarters, and there's one of them that has one in Charleston, Illinois or someplace like that, and I always hear the candidates that are going there all excited. Oh, they're going to send me to Charleston, Illinois or something like that, which is like in the middle of nowhere, outside of Chicago, and they're sending me in winter. And I'm always thinking to myself, I don't know why that's so exciting, but they get sent to those sort of things, and that's where you're going to get your initial training. But you'd also be interested in what the training program is going to be throughout your career, right? So you might ask about that, and employers will be happy to explain that to you because they know that that's an important part of retaining, promoting, and attracting and retaining good talent. If you are a certified public accountant in the state of California, after you get your license, you need to maintain something called continuing professional education. I'm sure other professions have that as well. So a lot of times the training program of the company is going to be something that's surrounded around any licensure or government regulation requirements for education as well. Okay. So we take a look at new employee orientation. Okay, to the organizational mission. Okay, appraisal evaluations, tour of work area. Here it is: breakfast and lunch periods, reporting of illnesses. What's the one thing I'm looking for that I don't see here? Okay. I was thinking that at some point, as part of the orientation, they might, have a thing where you meet with, staff and that sort of thing is a good orientation so that you know who the people are that you're going to be working with. Those sort of things are another good orientation step. But you can see all of these things that'll go into orientation. Okay, and a new job, on-the-job training. Okay, letting the employees know about that process. How they're going to be supervised, etc. Okay, training methods, on the job training, apprentice training, where you assign them to an individual who's going to help develop them. Okay, program learning approach, where we're going to have both in class and on the job training, combination of both. Simulation training, I think that's what's going on here because I don't think that's a real person, but you go ahead and you simulate the environment that they'll be working in ahead of time. Online training, that's probably not something for a newer person, although you could ask them to do some online training as well. Towards the end of my career with the GAO, almost all of our training became online training, and some of it was pretty well produced as well. And then there's also external providers of online training, that sort of thing. Huh?
Even some retail company.
Some what kind of company?
Retails. I used to work for those.
Uh-huh.
When you're trying to go to another management or trying to get something that you really want
Yeah.
to get promoted, you have to go online training.
Have to go through the online training as a prerequisite for promotion. Yeah, that's something that can be done as well. I'm engaged in where I'm actually the trainer for online training. It's external though. The people will purchase that training from another organization. But these online trainings are getting better and better produced these days. Okay. Okay, good. Management development programs such as job rotation, coaching, understudy, job shadowing, where they have you shadow a person to see what their job is like, action learning, off the job training, somebody sending somebody out externally. I know that some of my students that what they did was they worked with the company's auditors for a year and then came back after working for a year and came back to the company with obviously a lot more experiences. Executive coaching, mentoring. There's various leadership development programs that you can send employees out to so that they, develop those sort of skills, etc. So lots of training that could go into management development. Okay, performance appraisal, giving the employee feedback, evaluating their performance, and then setting goals going forward. Typically, performance appraisals happen on an annual basis. In my office, we moved to an annual basis for our evaluation process, probably in the back end of my career. Prior to that, it was by assignment. When you got done with an assignment, they would give you an appraisal on how you did on that particular assignment, which to me was much more effective because it basically would isolate. It was much easier to speak to that one assignment and the things that you did on that one assignment than it would be to speak about a couple of different assignments over the course of a year. But these days, more companies go to annual performance. What are some problems with appraisals? If the feedback is negative, that can get a little uncomfortable. I've heard through the walls. I was never involved in one myself, but I've heard shouting matches going on during performance appraisals. You've heard the rumor that so-and-so walked out crying from their performance appraisal. These sorts of things. So sometimes they can be very difficult. I think that the best way to do a performance appraisal, in my opinion, what I used to look at when I would receive those is I would say, did they give me my due? I go in there with certain expectations of what I expect them to have acknowledged that I've done well on an assignment, and if I don't see those in there prior to going in, I will ask, hey, what about this? What about that? Can we add this to the appraisal, right? From the standpoint of the person doing the appraisal, to me, the most important thing is, are you being fair with that individual, and are you getting the appropriate input for that? So the individuals that they worked with, maybe other individuals that you're asking for input, and I would always go in. I would always ask the question: is there anything that you want me to add to this or to change in this? And I was usually pretty open about making changes as long as they were reasonable. But the feedback process can get real funky. The appraisal process can get real weird real fast. I wrote an appraisal one time for an individual, and they wanted me the way our appraisal system worked. You could get a role model, you could get something like a good, you could get exceeds expectations, you could get role model, exceeds expectations, meets expectations, and then I think they had something called borderline or something, and then doesn't meet expectations, which if you count, that's 5 grades, so doesn't meet expectations is like an F. And if you gave them a needs or below expectations is what it was, then that started them on the process that they were going to have to go through counseling, that sort of stuff. So they wanted me to give somebody a below expectations in teamwork. teamwork is the area they wanted me to give the person below expectations. I think I had given the person an exceeds, and they wanted me to give them a below in terms of teamwork and their office environment, personality, that kind of thing. So I'm like, well, why do you want me to do that? And they said, well, the reason that we want to do that is because this person was supposed to help with something and supposed to get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she didn't show up until 8 o'clock. And so the other person had to do a lot of the work on their own, and they were very upset about that. And I said, so you basically want me to give her this doesn't meet, is below expectation because she overslept? And they're like, oh, well, John, you're being flippant now. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't see that I'm being flippant. I'm just saying that this is the situation. And so they said, well, you think about it, because they don't want to tell you what to put on the evaluation, but I'm getting called into these meetings, and they're trying to get my boss to override what I did. So I went and I asked the individual to write up something that she had done for years. She was spearheaded the office's food bank outreach around the holiday time, where she would get all the office to come in and contribute food, that sort of thing, and take it to the food bank. So I asked her to write that up for me. I stuck that into the evaluation, and then I put, from instead of putting down an exceeds, I put her down as role model for teamwork. And I said, here, you're right, I didn't consider everything. And now instead of knocking her down to below expectations, I moved her up even higher than where she was. And so now they were really upset at me. But it went forward like that, because that's hard to argue with someone who does work for a food bank in terms of office environment and that sort of thing. And so when I got my evaluation, I got knocked down on teamwork. And, because of this whole situation, they said that because I did her rating at the last minute, which everybody does, you have to have these ratings in by a certain date, and everybody rushes to get them in. They put in mind that because I did it at the last minute, they weren't able to completely, get the proper evaluation for that person, etc. So, huh? Yeah, it's supposed to be to learn, etc. And I've been in, all I'm sharing with this story is that I've been in dynamic where they use it as a tool to beat on somebody that they're pissed off at, essentially, right? And that's not what it's supposed to be about. That's right. But these can get real weird in a hurry. Okay? Performance management, direction sharing, clarifying what individuals are supposed to do, goal setting and planning, ongoing performance, periodic performance reports, coaching and supporting, ongoing feedback. Okay? To me, guys, we can put all of these things up here. If you're in a responsibility where you are, supervising somebody, I think your best bet is to be respectful of that individual, but also, just being honest with them and forward with them in terms of what it is you want. I don't want this from you. I want that from you. Can you please do it? Thank you. Now these days you got to be a little bit careful, because some people take that as that you were you took a poor tone with them or something. But I always said, well, I'd rather the person feel that there was something wrong with my tone, as opposed to them not knowing where they stand with me in terms of what my expectations are, that sort of thing. So you want to be as clear as possible. But I read one time this story. It was actually in a management class I took, and it was a story about a brother who had the ability to allow his other brother who was disabled to walk. All he had to do was put his hand on his shoulder, and the brother could walk. Okay? And so they talked about this in this story, that one day the brother who could put his hand on his shoulder and make the other brother walk was going to go out for a while. And so he set his brother in front of a chair and said, no worries, I'll be back in an hour or so. And the brother went out, and I guess he got delayed in returning, and the weather started getting worse, and rain started coming in through the window, and the other brother was sitting there saying, where is he? And finally, the brother showed up after 3 hours and put his hand on the brother's shoulder and said, I'm sorry I was late. Okay, and that's sort of where the story ended. And the idea there was what? The idea was that when somebody is that dependent on you, right, their interaction and the intention that you show them, etc., can be what? Can be amplified from the other perspective. From the perspective of the brother that was late, he was just late a couple of hours. From the perspective of the brother who everything was dependent, or a large part of his life was dependent on that brother, it was a big deal that there was that 2 hours. Okay, so the idea is to sort of put yourself in that other person's shoes, and then help to be as understanding as you can. By the same token, you can't subordinate your desire to help that individual along to the task at hand that needs to be done. So it becomes a pretty tough little thing to balance. I think honesty is probably the most important one of them. Okay. Okay, good. So let's take a look at the following. Which of the following is not a problem typically encountered with performance appraisals? What? There is much administrative pressure due to the high frequency of individuals' performance appraisals. I mean, the main thing is what? This high frequency. They're typically done what? Once a year. But then as you get closer to that once a year, then the administrative pressure starts getting turned up. So it's not like it doesn't have administrative pressure, but it's not because of the frequency. Okay, compensation strategies, salaries and wages, incentive-based compensation, commissions, bonuses. Okay, now you got to be careful with things like commissions, and that what? Make sure that the commission doesn't go against the best interest of the company. For example, you could put a commission based on sales price. Meanwhile, an item with a higher sales price, if it has a more cost associated with it, it may not affect the profitability of the company. So you've got your salespeople all focused on getting that bigger commission. Meanwhile, they're pushing products that what? The overall profitability of the company they don't contribute to as much. So, but all of these things are ways to compensate, bonuses, etc. Bonuses tend to be what? One-time bonuses. Okay, and I think I mentioned in here, how long does the excitement about a bonus last? How long is a person excited about their bonus? Probably, huh? Probably from the time you give it to them to when they receive the bonus, right? And then once they get the bonus, they see the taxes are still withheld from the bonus. They go, oh, they should have given me a bigger bonus, right?
More taxes.
Yeah, so you got to be careful with bonuses and thinking that that's going to affect that much, huh? Say again?
That affects sometimes.
Ye-
Give you more money rather carrying it almost like 45% of your bonus just for the bonus.
Yeah, it's going to have a pretty short-term effect. Of course, if you make the bonus that much of the compensation, the person almost has to earn the bonus to survive, right? So that might be one way to get some things out of it. It really depends on the company and the dynamic of the company. Bonuses can create some negatives as well. I remember they started using bonuses in my office at one point in time, and the way they set up the bonuses is that there was only 25% of the people could receive a bonus. That's the way they set it up. And so what happened? It was a nightmare for our regional manager. I know it was, because I think he had a heart attack at one point, and I think part of it was because all the pressure they were putting the guy under to figure out who of his staff of a federal agency, what 25% of the people should get bonuses. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so he went through a lot of angst there to try to figure that out. So bonuses can cause problems, jealousy problems, particularly when you need a collegiate environment for people to work in, like essentially my agency is a research agency. Research is a very collaborative effort because you need individuals from different disciplines and stuff. In fact, I remember I'm sitting in my office and all of a sudden I hear, "I want to speak to you right now." And go out, and it was one of our statisticians that was pounding on the regional manager's office that he wanted to speak to him about why he didn't get a bonus, because he was looking at it saying, I impact all the different assignments because the stats if stats are used on a particular assignment, statistics are used on a particular assignment, he had to sign off on that. So he's in there pounding. I want to speak to you right now. He's out there, and finally the secretary came and said, Tim's not in right now. The guy wasn't even in his office, and he's pounding. So, the irrational kind of things that occur a lot of times when you have these compensation and these bonuses can be problematic as well. Retirement plans these days, 401k. 401k is a section of the Internal Revenue Code. Under 401k, the employer will put money into an account for you, and often the employee these days will match that amount that the employer pays in. Or probably it's the other way around. The employee puts in and the employer matches, because the employer will match once they put in. What happens with these 401k plans if the stock market does this? Does the employer put more money in there for you? It's entirely what? Defined contribution. They put an amount in there for you, and what? And that's what you earn. Now, this is better for the employer because they can do what? They can limit their potential exposure, because once they've made the contribution, we're all at the whims of the market, aren't we? Okay? And so what happens? Pension plans, that's why they call it defined contribution plan, huh? To the employer, it is a tax deduction when they put amounts in the income retirement, the ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, is administered jointly through the Department of Labor and the Internal Revenue Service. They administer it jointly because of the deductibility of the contributions to a pension plan against a business's revenue. So it's a legitimate tax deduction. When the employer puts money into these 401k plans these days, they call that deferred compensation, and an employee is not taxed on up to 15% of the amount of their amounts that are contributed to, of their salary that is contributed into the 401k. So it's called deferred tax. You don't pay the tax when you put the money into the pension. You don't pay tax on that money, but when you withdraw from the pension, you're taxed on the distribution. There are some people that believe in what they call a Roth, sort of a Roth 401k, and with the Roth, you pay the tax, you put the money into the pension plan, but then when you retire, when you withdraw that money, you don't pay the tax. I wish I had done a Roth now, because I'm already drawing my pension out from the federal government, and I, of course, have to pay tax on that because I did the deferred compensation. I wish I would have done the Roth, because the taxes don't hurt as much when you're earning and you have other monies coming in, as opposed to when you're retiring and that's part of your income stream and you have to pay the tax on it. So I suggest a Roth plan, but they have different types of defined contribution plans, and the employer's exposure is limited to what they put in. If the market tanks in a defined contribution plan, the employer has essentially met up their obligation to you. They don't have to help to keep that plan viable, whatever, right? 401k is basically what we call defined contribution plan. IRA plan has different limitations, so they are similar, but usually that's something that the employee establishes themselves, whereas the 401k is usually something that's established through the employer. Okay, but they're very similar. They're very similar. Pension plan, defined benefit plan. In a defined benefit plan, the employer goes ahead and says, I promise that when you retire, you will receive 2% of your salary for the rest of your life. Okay, so 2% a year of your salary for the rest of your life. 2%, thanks a lot, right? So what happens if you work 30 years? We're talking about 60% of your money comes in when you retire. This is increasingly or decreasingly more and more common that you're not going to get a defined contribution plan from your employer because their exposure goes on what? For the rest of your life to give you 2% a year, say 60% of your salary for the rest of your life, that's an indefinite exposure to the employer, isn't it? Or however, not I should say indefinite because you're not going to live forever, but for whatever your life expectancy is, they're on the hook to provide that defined benefit. Yes, sir.
And some companies, some of them sometimes cash it out. Can we do that?
For the defined contribution plan, you cash out what you put in. You can cash out what you've put in if you leave. Defined benefit plan, they typically don't cash you out. What happens is you vest in those. And you vest in both of these, quite frankly. You have to vest. Under the ERISA laws, you have to vest within 5 years. Or if you don't invest after 5 years, they have to do what they call cliff vest you after 7 years, which means they have to catch up everything for you that they hadn't put in before then. Okay, so there's different vesting periods. Once you vest, you are entitled to both the employee and the employer contribution. And if you leave, you can go ahead and you can get the money out of a 401k. Defined benefit plan, all you're guaranteed is a certain retirement benefit once you reach the appropriate retirement age. You typically don't cash out of a defined benefit plan.
With that one, there's an age. Do they give any kind of years on it? Like they're gonna
Yeah.
tell you maybe after 10 or 15 or 20 years, that's your time that you're gonna maybe like cash your money or
You start to receive benefits. It's typically 62 out of a defined benefit plan. Out of defined contribution plan, it's typically 59 and a half at the time that they'll allow you to start to take the benefits out of it. You can start to draw your benefits. With the defined benefit plan, the problem is that the employer is on the hook to make sure that there's enough money in that plan to fund the retirement benefits of all the individuals that have retired from that entity. So more and more, you're not seeing companies offering defined benefit plans because of that potential risk exposure to the employer. My brother gets a defined benefit pension plan from the Teamsters. He gets 80% of his pay in retirement because he has a very strong union who still negotiates a defined benefit plan for him. My dad, by virtue of his age and the fact that he was a union employee, gets a defined benefit plan. I get a combination of defined contribution and defined benefit. The federal government went years ago to around the time when I came in. They were probably waiting for me to come in to change it because there's people that maybe started in the agency maybe 5 years before me. They are purely under defined benefit, so they get 2% for every year they work. When I came in, they changed it to a hybrid of you get 1% for every year you work, and then the remainder of your benefit has to come out of the defined contribution plan. I was actually on a study of pensions back in the late 80s, around 89. I was involved in a study, and we actually tracked the difference between defined contribution and defined benefit plan. And back in the 80s, the line had already crossed, and that you had more defined contribution plans than defined benefit plans. And I'm sure, I haven't looked at that lately, but I'm sure that trend has continued because of the limited exposure to the employers for these. These days, if you want a defined benefit plan, work for the government. You work for a city, you work for a county, you work for a college district, then you're going to be getting a defined benefit plan. If you work for a private sector employer, you're going to have a defined contribution plan. That's pretty much the way it works now. Okay. Other employee benefits, health insurance is a big one. Obviously, right, the better the plan. Vacation, holidays, sick pay. We've talked about retirement plans. Okay. you know, don't be fooled by the pool table if you go to work for somebody. I mean, that looks nice, but when you go into some of these beautiful facilities, they call them campuses now. I hear like Google is like off the hook if you work for them, if you're on their campus, and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, but I'd be looking at this kind of thing. I know it's hard for you sometimes at your age to realize the benefits of that. Something like this has what? Has inertia to it. The pension plan builds over time, right? Something like, you can't see it right up front. Something like this is great, but and this could be a nice memory for you someday, but money's also important and something that contributes to pension plans and some of these other things. Okay. Flexible work arrangements. Telecommuting is a big deal. When I retired from the government, everybody said, geez, John, you're stupid to retire because we now have this thing where we only go into the office one day a week. So we only had to go into the office one day a week, and we only had to be there for an hour one day a week. And so we worked from home the rest of the week. And, of course, immediately what did I start? The only thing you had to do is you had to give up your office. So if you had an office, you had to give it up if you were going to sign up for that sort of thing. They had different options, like you could come into the office 3 days a week. And the idea was that if enough people agreed to give up their office, they would go ahead and implement this program because it would allow us to get rid of one of the floors on our building in our office space. Instead of having 2 floors, we were going to be able to have just 1 floor, and that was going to help to make the office more viable. And show our cost cutting on that. So what we did, I couldn't wait to sign up for that. I was like, where do I sign that? I only have to come to the office 1 day a week. And then I started having trouble making it to the office that 1 day a week, of course, because it was stupid, because I had to go all the way into San Francisco just to be there for 1 hour, right? And so they started, John, you have to be here 1 hour, we didn't see you. And I'm like, well, so what? Okay, so it's always the next thing, right? Compressed work weeks, what they call flexing. Maybe you work 10 hours a week, and then you get 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day, and then you get 1 day off each pay period on a Friday or a Monday or something. They call that flex day. So that's becoming more and more common. I can't understand why they're showing us a UPS guy here, though. Because, huh? Yeah, so why are they showing us a UPS guy? I mean, unless the truck drives itself 1 day a week, I'm not sure how that gets done unless he goes ahead and is there. So maybe he's bringing stuff to you from work, right, is what they're trying to portray there. Okay. Contingent workforces. Okay, you can use contractors, consultants. You can hire contingent workers as needed. Okay. Independent contractors, self-employed. One of the nice things about hiring somebody as a contractor is that you don't have to pay their Social Security. So if you hire them as a contractor, then what? Then you don't pay Social Security. Excuse me, are you in this class?
Yeah.
You're registered in this class?
Yes.
Okay, how come you haven't been to class all this time?
I've been in class.
Oh, have you? Okay. Okay, so if you're sitting here and you are what? I never saw her before. You're sitting here and you are what? Registered. No, I'm thinking about it. If you're using a self-employed individual, you don't have to pay their Social Security, right? And so if you don't pay their Social Security, that's a major savings. However, what will happen is Social Security will look at that, and they'll look to the level that you direct the efforts of that individual. And if you direct their efforts too much, Social Security will say, no, that's an employee. You have to pay their Social Security. So if you hire somebody as a contractor, now what? Now you're going to have to give them much more latitude in terms of how they achieve the performance. And so if you want to control their efforts more, you probably wouldn't want to hire them as a contractor. But there are some benefits to hire them as a contractor. Okay. Promotions, top 10 ways to get promoted. They always say get a mentor, And then I hear people talking about how they got a mentor, and it always sounds like this kind of Machiavellian thing that they did, where they sat there and they said, well, when I wanted to see who my mentor was, I figured out who was most connected to the decision makers about promotions, etc., as opposed to, well, I looked for somebody that I thought I could really learn from. I looked to somebody that I thought I could talk to honestly about what I was trying to accomplish, what my concerns were with the company, that sort of thing. And so, yes, you should probably get a mentor, but the way they put it is like it's something that you could force or you can do. I think that getting a mentor, a real true mentor, somebody that you will, to me, a good mentor is somebody that things that they say to you today, you'll be thinking about 20 years from now. And you'll understand what they said 20 years ago today as you develop more experience, that sort of thing. Okay? I had a mentor, his name was Dave Peltier. And Dave was very good at being a mentor. Dave liked the intrigue of what was going on in the audit field. That's why he was such a good mentor. So I could come back to him and say, well, I saw this, I saw that, and Dave would come back and say, well, geez, maybe they're doing this or maybe they're doing that. Have you checked into this? And I could go back and look and see if indeed that was some of the things that were going on. Okay, and so I would come back and go back and forth with him. So that sort of person, to me, makes a better mentor than somebody that, they're well connected to the regional manager. So let me make them my mentor because I know they'll say good things to me, for me, to the regional manager if they're my mentor. Meanwhile, when you get into the meeting about your promotion, they'll say, well, I'm not sure that John's quite ready yet. Let's give him another year to develop or something like that, as opposed to being a strong advocate for you. So a mentor is somebody you need to trust, etc. Okay? Learn from outside of work. Sometimes the work structure for learning and developing is limited to whatever's going on there. You can bring in ideas from the outside, then you're seen as somebody that is, very creative, etc. Tell your boss you want to be promoted. Obviously, if you put in for a promotion, that's a pretty good indication that you want to be. Where does it say volunteer? Right here? Okay. Volunteer. Now, you could look at that and say, you mean volunteer like to help out with building homes with Habitat for Humanity or something? Is that what they mean by volunteer? Well, there's that kind of volunteering, but also volunteering to take on a task that maybe nobody else wants, inside the company. Gee, we need somebody to help with this particular process in the company, and everybody steps back because they know it's a pain, right? You could distinguish yourself by saying, yeah, okay, I'll take that on. I can handle that, right? Or maybe working for the person that everyone else is trying to avoid working for or something like that, okay? Okay, good. Terminating employees could be due to downsizing. If that's the case, there are outplacement services that are provided where they'll help individuals find new jobs, etc. Due to poor performance or a policy violation, obviously, is a much more difficult item. Employment at will basically is what most states have as a law. Employment at will means pretty much that ultimately an employer can do what? Can let you go for their own reasons, whatever they happen to be, and obviously not for discriminatory reasons, but in terms of the needs of the company, performance, the employee can do what? Can leave the employment at will. That's what we mean by employment at will. Most states have that case, okay? And of course, there has to be documentation as to the reasons leading to dismissal in that sort of situation. Retirement, sometimes they'll buy out workers that are close to retirement age. Changes in the retirement age, making it easier to retire if you're trying to encourage individuals to retire. they're talking about increasing retirement ages these days. What is the reason they give for that? What are the reasons that they give for increasing retirement age? Our retirement age is 62, but we're going to increase it to 67. Or you hear that all the time as a way to solve the deficit a little bit and help keep Social Security solvent. They say we're going to increase the retirement age from 62 to say 67. What's the excuse they give for that? Increase retirement age from 62 to 67. Does that sound like a good idea?
I think so.
Why? What would be a good reason to do that?
Just for depends on someone who wants to get more money. That way.
Huh?
Who wants to get more income and then more money for
Okay,
someone.
I'm supposed to be able to retire when I'm 62, and what I asked you is, do you think it's a good idea to make the person wait until they get their retirement money until they're 67? And you said you thought that was a good idea?
That depends on. Probably in my opinion, that'd be good. But for some reason, it's not.
Okay, I'm not 62, by the way. Okay, but a person is 62. And at 62, I'm supposed to be able to get my Social Security money at 62. Okay? Now, what they're talking about is changing the law to where you have to wait till you're 67 to receive that retirement money, which means instead of getting it for when you're 63, 64, 65, 66, you won't get anything until you're 67. And you say you think that's a good idea? Okay, but I understand you're saying it's not, but she's saying it is, and I'm trying to understand what it is that makes you think it's a good idea. Now you think it's not a good idea because, huh? Okay, does anyone think it's a good idea? Nobody thinks it's a good idea? I mean, I hear people say it's a good idea, and the reason they say it's a good idea is they say, well, it'll help to solve the budget deficit because now people have to wait longer to get their pension benefit, right, from Social Security. And the reason that they give is they say, well, people live longer now. Before we used to die when we were, 67. Now we live until we're 79 or something stupid like that. So it makes sense to make us wait longer, which I tell people, well, I'm interpreting that as the government saying, we want you to die before you receive your benefits, right? We'd rather you die without receiving the benefit than receive the benefit, because what's going to happen? Between the ages of 62 and 67, I guarantee you some people will die during that time frame, right? So if you go ahead and you increase retirement age, you're basically waiting for people to die so that you don't have to pay them the benefits, right? Well, supposedly they'll be viable. Everyone pictures themselves, the old person running on the beach, right? Meanwhile, what? There's a lot of old people that, like you're indicating here, don't have the wherewithal to be productive during that time, right? Huh? Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea. If you work for the federal government, you get to collect your Social Security at 56. You can start collecting your Social Security at 56 years old. I think this law is going to be eliminated. They're going to go after that now like no other, and nobody is going to stand up for federal employees and say, no, don't do that to the federal employees. No one's going to stand up. So I think that one's on the short list of ones that they're going to cut out and make us be like everybody else, wait till we're 62. Now the thing that's to me is not right about that is presumably someone made a decision of a career in civil service with the idea that, hey, I'm not going to make as much in the short run, but I'm going to have better retirement benefits, et cetera, and then you start to pull some of those back. Doesn't seem exactly like a fair deal. But anyway, so we have changes in retirement age. Sometimes they'll let you retire earlier if they're trying to get you out. Sometimes they'll buy you out. They'll say, okay, if you retire right now, we'll give you an extra $50,000 towards your pension or something like that. Or they could cash you out. Okay. Workplace diversity. More and more we're having diverse workforce, and so we need to be aware of the changing demographics in the United States and then address those things accordingly. Okay, outsourcing and offshoring, like we talked about. If we've offshored some work, there may be a particular holiday that's going on in another country that we're not aware of, and we can't expect that they're going to, just ignore their holiday, their tradition to provide us services on a certain day, etc. So something that we need to think about. Increased number of older workers. Okay, that's going to be the case as well, as you have an aging workforce and less young individuals to take those positions. You may have to address the fact that you're going to have an older workforce and you're going to have to make appropriate accommodations there. Affirmative action, I think I mentioned last time. Okay, affirmative action is something that does what? We look at candidates, and sometimes affirmative action says, well, that means you have to hire this many Hispanic employees or something like that. That is not what affirmative action says. Affirmative action says that if you have two candidates that are equally qualified, then one way that you could stop the ball of discrimination from rolling downhill is, of course, not to discriminate. But if you want to push that ball back up the hill, that's what affirmative action does. And that if you have two candidates that are equally qualified, you should give an opportunity to an individual who's in an underrepresented group. Okay, impact of diversity. We have culture diversity, religion, gender, age. We obviously have grown as a society in terms of being more open to all of these things. There's also laws now that we have to consider as we become a more and more diverse culture. Okay, what is that? Oh, I see. She's hugging a motorcycle. Okay, Harley Davidson. Okay. Greg is 57 years old and is looking for a new job, even though he knows many companies prefer not to hire older workers. Well, if he knows that, then he should report that somewhere because that's against the law. That's a discrimination. You can't not want to hire older workers. But which of the following is likely a disadvantage of hiring Greg? Expectation of a fairly high salary. Why did I put this question in here? This is a stupid question. I mean, how is that a disadvantage of hiring him? If he won't come in at the salary you're offering, he just doesn't come in, right? So I don't know that that's a disadvantage of hiring him. It may make it more difficult to hire someone of Greg's talents and experiences if you're offering a lower wage, but it is not a disadvantage of hiring him. He's going to come in at whatever it is they're offering. This is a disadvantage to Greg in that what? He's sitting there and he's been working and he's now been displaced in his job, whatever, and he's used to making a certain amount of money. He may not be interested in a position that's paying lower, and it may be more difficult for him to find something that's paying him at the level that he's used to. Is something to consider for him. Okay, good. Veronica is re-entering the workforce after years away, caring for her elderly parents. She's making many assumptions about today's workforce. Which of the following is false? The number of women in the workforce is growing. Which of the following is assumption? Women may face sexual harassment. That's true. Women receive fewer promotions than their male counterparts. That's true. Women battle sexism in the workplace. That's true. women receive pay equal to their counter. Oh, that's false. I see. See how you take a test? Because I was looking at E, thinking E was D, D was D, and that's true, right? That is a problem. Women receiving pay equal to their male counterparts. That's false. We know from the election, right? That was one of the topics, equal pay for equal work, that women do not receive pay equal to their male counterparts, right? Okay. Okay, good. So this is a good question. Now I see why I put it there. Labor unions advocate better working conditions, negotiate specific employment issues for members. You know, guys, you may not realize, because we're talking over 100 years ago, the reason that you have vacation, that you have employer paying for your health insurance, the reason that you have employer paying into your as I said, your health care and all that, is because of unions. Prior to that, the reason you have a 40-hour work week is because of unions. All of those things, safe working conditions, all of these things that now seem like, the federal government stepped in years ago and said, we're going to do this. That's not true. It was because of the pressure that was put on them by the unionization of laborers, essentially, that is the reason that you have all of these things that you have now. And so they back off a lot of times, and they say, well, unions have become obsolete and they're not necessary anymore because the laws and the employers have to do it. I personally believe that if you didn't have some sort of organization there, unions that are basically put together by the laborers, that you would not have all these things, and the pendulum would swing back eventually. Okay, it's sort of like what? If you put a security guard in front of a place, nothing bad going to happen. You remove the security guard, bad things start to happen again, right? And so I'm a believer of that. I was a member of an organization that is no longer part of the AFL-CIO. It's called the, now I'm going to forget what it stands for, SEIU, the Service Employees and Institutional Workers Union. This is a union of janitors, okay? And they are now probably one of the biggest unions that there are that are left of janitors, and they do a lot of important work to make sure not only of things like, some of the things I mentioned, but safety and working conditions for janitors. In the hospital, one of the big problems we had was, in terms of safety conditions, was the issue that a lot of times the health workers would forget to put needles into a sharps container. So they're supposed to put a needle into a sharp container. It was happening more and more. I got stuck like 3 times by a stray needle, okay, that was thrown inappropriate inside of a bag. And, in this day and age, with a lot of the concerns with, different things like AIDS and that sort of stuff, getting stuck by needles is kind of a big deal, right? One time I'm walking, and the needle just stuck me right in the leg because they had it in the bag. And when you get stuck by a needle, they have to give you a tetanus shot. When you get a tetanus shot, you get a couple shots in the hip and everything else. It's a big deal, okay? And so we went to the union about this, and the union was very vocal about getting some changes and some, policies, and having some notices put up about properly, securing needles and that sort of thing. So unions can do a lot of this sort of thing in standing up for the workers, okay? Now, we have the collective bargaining agreement. I suggest that if you find yourself in a unionized position, that you get the contract and you read that contract carefully, so that you understand what is in that collective bargaining agreement. That contract, if there is no agreement, we can sometimes have arbitration or mediation, and sometimes if we can't agree, there can be there can end up being a strike, right? And that can be problematic. Okay. Again, they say that there's a decline in traditionally unionized industries. I think that's the case, but I'm not entirely sure that there's also not a growth in some areas. For example, as we become a more service-based economy like we are now, you could have office workers now start to unionize. When I left the federal government, we had unionized in the federal government, and so in our particular agency. So yes, declining in certain types of traditionally unionized industries, but I think there's a growth in unionization of non-traditional labor type positions. Okay. Question on any of that? Okay, good. So that pretty much takes us up through chapter, what was that? 9? Okay. So next time we will get into chapter 12, and we're just going to continue like that through to the end of the course as we get closer to our final. Okay. All right, guys, have a good rest of the day, and I will see you on Tuesday.